you have an old sound tape or your favorite cassette tape that you want converted to CD or MP3 format? Do you need a demo CD, radio ad, a DJ or even a sound system for your wedding, birthday or special occasion? Then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448 or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We've been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, doublets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, come your way.
I was terrified about sharing the vulnerabilities of people with difficulties reading and spelling words. However, I can see the value in sharing, and I have taken the time to make some notes about this in my book, Dyslexic: The Silent Difference. You can get your copy now at www.a1tribe.com or amazon.com or amazon.co.uk. Thank you again, everyone, for your support.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, you're World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in school. I learned my lessons in the street. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd shoot you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters.
The accusations are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time. Pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime, pay for my crime. Already did my time, I paid for my crime. already did my time. I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women. I had girls all over the street. I was getting money. Life was so sweet. Now things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged.
I want to say a big good evening, good afternoon, good morning to you, wherever you might be. My name is Kevin Julian. This is another edition of Issues Today, live on World Jam Global Radio, coming to you from the UK. Going to you right across the world. Big shout-outs going out to our consistent listeners, especially Vanessa Whirling, Lorraine Thompson. Big shout-out going out to Yolanda McNair. Senior mama of the Roundtable team. And have we got a story to tell today? My guest today is Tonja Brown, the sister of Nolan Edward Klein. Alongside my ever-present, riding shotgun once again, and fit as a fiddle, back in the hot seat, assistant producer, co-producer, my right hand, it's TJ, Therese Gallagher. Stand by for a big introduction. This one is the ultimate story. It's the one that we always fear that one day we'll have to report on. And it is here. It's real. Trying to cope with this living here. Imagine being sentenced trying to cope for a crime you didn't commit. Imagine spending all of your time fighting for freedom. And imagine I paid for my crime. You never get to see the light of day because you lose your life while incarcerated due to neglect and lack of medical care. And forgive us while the fight we forgive those who trespass for your freedom continues. Temptation, but that is the story that we've got for you today. Kingdom, the power, the glory forever. With some powerful evidence, facts, and information that will prove beyond doubt that Nolan Edward Klein was innocent. It ain't about nothing. His sister still fights on. He who was out sin, let him cast the first. The fight for his freedom, the fight to exonerate him, the fight to clear his name continues. And live like an ordinary citizen again. And we're going to be talking to her very shortly. My friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide, and put down those knives. Stop stabbing each other. Yeah. We're going to be going to Tonja Brown in just a few seconds. Stand by. Now here's the problem, you see, because when we try to post this edition live, I was blocked from tagging people. I was blocked from putting the editorial into this story. And then when I tried to post it, the entire story disappeared from social media and the internet. So I've had to post it again without tagging anybody. I've had to post it again without an editorial. As you guys know, I normally do. I put a bit of a story in there to give you an understanding as to what the show is about. But the powers that be was desperately trying to block us from bringing this show out live today. But we never give in. We never give up. And we always find a way to bring this story to you. Big shout out going out to Scott Russian, another hardcore member of our roundtable team who's listening in. And to all of you that are listening, wherever you might be, once again, you can get us live on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. We are live on Facebook. We are live on Twitter, on World Jam Global Radio, on Issues Today, and on my personal Facebook page. We are live. We're also live on YouTube, and we are live somewhere else as well. I think it's Twitch or something or the other. But we're also live on the World Jam Global Radio website. So we are live, going out live across the world. And we are talking about one of the most corrupt cases that you may ever get to hear about. But before we do, I want to introduce you. And it's really been a while now because she's not been well. We all know that she's undergone an operation on her knee. We have missed her terribly. But I cannot tell you how glad I am to have my right hand, my sidekick, my co-producer, Therese Gallagher, TJ to her friends, back with me. So hi, TJ, how are you? Are you there? Come in, please. Say hello. TJ? She's muted her mic. TJ, come in, talk to me.
Okay, I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
I'm here, I'm talking. How you doing? Good morning.
We're good. And
good afternoon to you across the pond there, boss.
Yeah,
but
it's the afternoon
we're still
across the pond.
morning here. How are you?
Yeah, we're great. So how are you doing, TJ? Tell us a bit more about you. Yeah,
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, because you've had your knee sorted out now.
Oh my gosh! I'm up. I'm walking. I went to the doctor yesterday. I'm 2 weeks ahead of anybody else that has this type of surgery, and I'm jazzed and I'm excited to move on. It's been a hindrance, but I'm tough. Thank you.
Tough as old boots. And we actually had an absolutely storming round table last week with Christine Bunch, Stephanie Babler, Yolanda.
Oh my gosh.
And Patrick. I mean, it was absolutely awesome. Powerful.
I mean, on fire. Yes.
And I just can't.
And I want to take the time to thank them, boss, to thank them all.
Yeah.
For their contribution and just for stepping up to the plate. It was like a sudden call out because of some of our guests not appearing, but everyone came together and stepped up to the plate, and boy, was it on fire. I mean, thank you all. I can't be more gracious to Patrick Lane or you, because you were surrounded by Yolanda McNair, Dee Martin, Stephanie Babb, Christine Bunch, and myself.
We were surrounded. But that's the beauty of what we're doing here, and I think that's why it was spirit filled. There was a reason why those other two shows that we tried to book for that week couldn't go ahead, because I believe that there was the powers that be, the greater powers ahead, wanted that unison, that togetherness, that coming together. That particular show last week needed to be done, and it was absolutely awesome.
It was. I agree. I loved it. I loved it because it just flowed. And then, boom, 2 hours was over just like that. And that's usually how our shows go.
Absolutely.
It's like, what am I going to, some of my guests, I tell them, okay, I'll give you the 2 hour slot. And they go, what am I going to do in 2 hours? That's a long time. I said, it'll be over before you know it. And sure enough.
You blink and you miss it.
Right?
But here's the thing. At the last minute, I'm away next weekend, so there is no show next week. And then the guest that we had booked in for next week, the week after that, the 31st, something about a baby. Is it her birthday? There's a baby involved or something or the other. So she's really asked us to cancel and postpone for another date. And I've not long come off the phone to the aunt of Alton Sterling. And on the 31st of August, we're going to be doing the Alton Sterling story, and I've been desperate to do that since 2016 when he was shot dead by 2 officers at Baton Rouge. I've just never had a direct contact or connection to that family. And we have got that now. I just come off the phone to her just a very short while ago. And she's agreed to come on the show on the 31st of August to do the Alton Sterling show. And again, it's one of those that I'm absolutely honoured to accommodate. So that's awesome, right, TJ?
Right. And, I woke up to that. I woke up to that text message from your boss saying, this is what's going to go down on the 31st. And so I had to get on Google and Google Alton Sterling. And oh my gosh, the 2016 shooting was horrendous. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 2 police officers take down this man. And there's footage right there, video footage of watching them take him down, and he is on the ground, and they shoot him. And it just it's one of we've seen some horrendous murders. But this is, and that's normally from somebody's cell phone that they've videoed, etc. It's very rare we've actually got anything as clear cut as what we see here. And
coming from
sorry,
TJ. It's very, very rare we get something as clear cut as that coming directly from the body cam of the officers that are shooting him.
Exactly.
So
and then they say that they put the cops on leave, and then they say, oh well, we're going to let the cops off because of the shooting death of him. It was well-rounded and reasonable. They said, "There's that word again, reasonable." Well, 2 years later, they announced that no charges will be filed against the 2 officers. How can that be?
I don't know, but Vader has just told me, his aunt has just told me on that call that they've only for the first time, they've actually said sorry for what they did.
Imagine that.
Right, so that's on the 31st of August. But TJ, you have worked tirelessly to bring this particular story that we're doing here today onto this show. You've spent a lot of time talking with our guest, and I believe that the story that we're about to hear is just as huge, if not bigger, than the stories that this is. I've just spent a little time talking to Tonja Brown, but this story is huge.
It is. It's crazy. And every time I've talked to Tonja, it's like she gives me this vast amount of information about what happened to her brother, Nolan, and on a wrongful conviction. And every single bit of information she gives me has got to do with corruption or mishandling of the evidence or all the things that we've talked about at the round table, criminalization. And it just blows me away. I said, oh my gosh, you've got so much information to give. And I can't even focus or bring the avenue down to one spot, except for in the end with Nolan. He died in prison. He died while she was trying to get him exonerated. 21 years he spent in prison.
Wow.
And he passed. And she's still fighting. And she is a warrior, let me tell you. Let's welcome her.
Yeah, well, why don't you just go ahead and introduce her, and let's hear what this wonderful lady has got to say.
Okay, Tonja. It's been a pleasure getting you ready for our show, and we know it's just going to be on fire too. Welcome to our show, Tonja.
Thank you, and good morning, TJ, and good afternoon, Kervin. And to everyone, hello.
Well, it's absolutely awesome to hear your voice. Why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about you, Tonja? Let's find out about you, who you are, where you're from, what you do, what your family life is like, how many children you have, are you married, do you work, what's your occupation? Let's get an understanding of who you are.
Okay, I'm Tonja Brown. I live in Carson City, Nevada. I've been here since 1971. I have had 3 siblings. I lost Nolan in 2009. I have an older brother, and I have two older brothers. One lives in Washington, and the other one, I don't know where he's at, and we'll just leave it at that. I have two children. I have a daughter, Crystal, and I have a son, Robbie. They both live in Carson. I have two grandchildren. They're Crystal and her husband's children, Adon. I've been working at the same job for over 30 years. I have my own business. And I chose to stay with this business because of my brother, because if there was something that he needed, I could just stop whatever I was doing and go and take care of it. If I had a regular job, then I probably would have been fired numerous times. I am married. I've been married for over 40 years. Other than that, I will say that besides my work that I do, I also, over the years, have become an advocate for the inmates and an advocate for the wrongfully convicted. What I do try to do is I try to get legislation created in order to help the inmates and those who've been wrongfully convicted, a chance to seek their innocence. Okay. I do other things as well, but those are my primary things that I do work on.
One of the things that I think we'll have to do before we part company, Tonja, is that we're going to have to connect you with Christine Bunch.
Okay.
If you don't know about Christine or you don't know Christine, she does very similar work to what you do in trying to change legislation, and she's very much an advocate for people of wrongful conviction, having been a wrongfully convicted person herself. Sentenced to 60 years for murder, 50 years for arson. After her 3-year-old child died in an accident, the police decided to charge her with murder, and she spent almost 17 years in prison before they finally found out that it was actually an accident, and the documentation that would have proved that she was innocent had been hidden all this time. So very similar type of corruptional behavior that took place to have her incarcerated. But she fought, got herself exonerated, and she's now an advocate and fighting for people who are wrongfully convicted. So she's got a powerful movement going, and maybe you guys might just want to get together and touch base to find out what you guys are trying to accomplish, and maybe, two heads are always better than one, and that kind of thing. So she may have already started crossing bridges that you're trying to cross, and vice versa. So we're going to try and put you guys in touch. So that's really amazing to hear what you're doing and where you are for yourself. But that's not why you're here today. You're not here for you. You're here to continue telling the story of your beloved brother. And I was so shocked to hear that although this is over 30 years since he was convicted, only 21 of those years were spent in prison because, alas, he died while incarcerated and never got to see the light of day as a free man.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do at this moment in time to postpone talking about how he got arrested, why he got arrested, what he got charged for, and what happened to him while he was in prison. First, let's talk about your brother Nolan as you remember him growing up as a child. Are you older than he is? Is he older than you? And what was your relationship like? And what was the relationship like with the siblings? What was he like going through school? How was he in the community? What was his friendships like, relationships like? Did he have any children? Did he ever get married? Tell us a bit about Nolan from the beginning, please.
Okay. Nolan and I are approximately 6 years apart. We never really had a real close relationship growing up, but as we became adults, then our relationship became stronger. So you've heard the word dysfunctional family. Yeah. I would say that we came from a dysfunctional family. So you really have to understand what kind of a person or he became from being a dysfunctional family. As growing up, I myself, and I have an older brother, 16 months apart, we tended to be living with other people. My mother liked to drink a lot. She was not a parent that was there all the time. Okay. And I'll give you a prime example. When we moved to Nevada back in 1970, Nolan decided that he didn't want to live here He wanted to go back to California, and he wanted to live with his dad. We have the same father. Now, our father, I call him Johnny. Everybody else calls him Dad. So anyways, when he returned to California, he was picked up and arrested as a juvenile for being a runaway. And he did not and would not tell the officers his name. So naturally, they had to arrest him. And while he was in the juvenile detention center, somebody from his past, a classmate, recognized him, and they are the ones who told the police who he was. So what they did was they were able to contact our father, Johnny. And Johnny came down to the detention center and got him released. And so when he was released, Nolan was expecting to go and live with him. Well, wasn't going to happen, because Johnny had just told Nolan that he had just gotten married and he couldn't bring him back to the house. So he gave him $200 and told him basically goodbye. And when Nolan asked why, he says, "I can't have you come back. How am I going to explain to your mother, to my new wife, about you when I told her that you and your mother and the family were killed in a car accident?" Okay, so, right. So I would say that we do not have a good relationship with our dad, Johnny. So that's kind of how it was. So when Nolan was finally returned, he turned 16 while he was on the road. He chose to come back to be back with the family. When he returned back to, at the time we were living in Stad, we had moved. We had moved to Carson City. So he didn't know, but our mother still worked at the same restaurant. She was a waitress. And so it was, and at the time she had remarried, and that was the issue. Nolan did not like the stepdad. So she decided to put him in a place with some friends in Sun Valley, and they turned out to be seedy people. Okay. So being young and learning that way of life and living with that type of criminal behavior, Nolan adapted. Okay. So Nolan, I'm going to say, was not your average upstanding citizen. He had done things in the past. He had a criminal record. And as he got older and he wised up, we'll say, he did go to prison. Back in the early 80s, he had come home, found his wife in bed, and he had beaten her. And because of that, he wound up going to prison on that charge. He was released in 1983, and from 83 to up until 1988, he had pretty much straightened out his life. He did get a couple of DUIs. He turned to, prior to that, he had turned to his arrest in 83. He had turned to drugs and alcohol. He had an injury, and so he turned to drugs and alcohol. He had issues with, too. My father was an alcoholic, my mom, so it kind of, ran in the family. But after 83, when he got out, he met a woman, Renee, who would later become the mother of his, she would be the mother of his child. And he's turned his life around. And then in 1988, this would happen. And it would change everyone's lives, especially his, forever.
We're hearing a really sad story here, and I think it's what I really do want to thank you for is your honesty about Nolan and about some of the difficult things that he went through, some of the experiences that he had in his life, and some of the things that he went through and did is not as bad as or as shameful as some other people might say. I was a drug addict for 36 years before I found God and turned my life around, so I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, but for the grace of God go I. So, but we all find different ways of either coping or not coping with our difficulties, and it's not how you fall that is a test of your character. It's how you get back up again, and it sounds like Nolan was trying to get back up again. So as Nolan was trying to get back up again, what would we say was the pinnacle turning point in his life from there on in, do you think?
It would be when he met Renee. And it would be when she became pregnant with his child and they had a son.
And so at that point, he started to grab a hold of life and try to make some better choices, right?
Correct.
Okay, so now we're kind of...
He found reason. He found reason.
He found a purpose to exist.
Yes.
Right.
He found a purpose to exist, and sometimes it takes others longer to find that than most. So, again, we're not here to judge. I'm still struggling with certain family members that are still trying to find their feet on solid ground. But hey, here we go. We'll keep on praying for them, standing in the gap for them, and hoping that they'll eventually start making better choices. So here's Nolan trying to make some better choices. He's now got a son. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to live the right way. Then I imagine at some point, this great big cobblestone fell out of the sky and crushed him. Tell us what you know about the incident, and we don't want to talk about how he was arrested. The incident that led to him being arrested. What do you know about what happened to the woman involved?
Oh, okay, we're going to have to, prior to his arrest and him being picked up months earlier for the questioning, I want to give you a little background on what led to him being where he was when he was picked up in May for questioning.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay. So back in 1988, we had a '67 Chevy Impala. It was a bucket seat with a console. Okay. We had a few weeks prior to Nolan this crime, May 9th, 1988 crime, we had sold him our car, okay? And at the same time, there was something else going on. Do you remember me telling you previously that he had moved to Sun Valley as when he was younger, and he had gotten involved with some people? Well, some of these people had come back into his life only to mess with him. And what happened was he had a panel truck that he had just rebuilt, and this individual, his name was Junior. And Junior tried to obtain the title to the vehicle that Nolan owned by going through the DMV and obtaining the title. And Renee had found out about it. And so she, along with Nolan, and had gone down to the DMV to try to stop this title from being issued to him, but it was too late. The Nevada Department of Transportation Motor Vehicles had already sent out the title. So he, and along with my husband, had gone back out to the Sun Valley. They'd brought the police officers with them. They got the panel truck back, and it was returned, and it stayed on our property. And the vehicle that we sold Nolan was having a little bit of an engine problem, which he already knew. And he knew that the engine in the panel truck had been rebuilt because he had done it. So he was switching engines in the vehicle, okay? And so at that time, we used to get trash pickup on Thursdays. Our garbage collectors picked up trash on Thursday. And Nolan was out there changing engines, so on and so forth, when the neighbor across the street, her name was Flo Kimball, had yelled at him to get the dog out of the street. Well, Flo had never met my husband, Robert. So she really didn't know who the man was. She yelled at. She just assumed it was Robert, but it was not. And so, anyways, this would be the Thursday before. Now we get into May 9th, okay, which was the following Monday. At this time, I had paid my brother, I offered him a job to rebuild the roof because he also worked construction. He was working construction at the time. He was looking for a new job, going to go out of state, but I asked him to stay to repair my daughter's roof. We had some wind damage. So he, over the weekend, had worked out, started to get everything together. And then on Monday, he began, which was the day of the crime, May 9th, working on the roof to fix. And at that time, I was home and I was cleaning up the house. And I realized that our dog, Brandy, was not feeling well. And it reminded me that the doctor had said that she had to give her some worm pills, and I forgot. So I'd run out to get them. I came back, I gave her the pills, and she threw up. And that is when my brother, Nolan, told me about Flo Kimball yelling at him a few days ago. So I waited for Flo to get home. She lives probably about 75 feet. We were in a cul-de-sac away. I went up and I asked her about it. And she said to me, she was telling me about it, and then she said, I was so pissed off at your husband. And then she was pointing at my house, and I turned and I looked, and Nolan had come out. I said, no, that's not my husband, that's my brother. She says, I yelled at him the other day to get the dog out of the street. And I says, well, she's not feeling well. If she doesn't get better by tonight, I'll take her to the vets tomorrow, which would be May 10th. So Nolan kind of finished up the roof that day. He was still waiting for some supplies to come in, and he started it. So that evening, the night of the crime, which was May 9th, some of you may remember exactly where you were 32 years ago or 31 years ago, was because that was what his defense was based on. We've heard of Nostradamus, the prophet.
Yeah.
He predicted that on May 10th, 1988, California would suffer a great earthquake, and the California would fall into the ocean. So there was a joke going on that night. So he had dressed that evening. He'd taken a shower. He left wearing his Levi's, and he always wore a black Harley Davidson t-shirt. And he had a brown belt that said Nolan on it. Okay. Now, he was meeting our mother at a bar called Jack's Bar in Carson. And so he had dressed, he had gone that evening. And he, along with several other people, were in the bar discussing Nostradamus' prediction. It was a joke, and making bets on whether tomorrow's prediction was coming through. That's why everybody remembered May 9th. It was a huge story because every California was panicking, is it going to happen? So at the same time that he is in the bar, there is a armed robbery sexual assault taking place in Sparks, Nevada, which is about 35 miles from Carson. And
so we just repeat that so our audience understands that. At the same time he was doing this, there was a crime taking place 35 miles away.
Correct. The crime took place at approximately 9:15 in the evening. It was at the Payless Shoe Store on the corner of Prater and McCarran in Sparks. They closed the store at 9 o'clock. The victim, Teresa, was outside washing the windows, and the other employee, Bridget, was inside the store closing up when a person came up from behind Teresa and with a knife and brought her into the store. Now, Nolan is in Carson City playing pool with Bill Richards. John Darnell is there. He is present. He is a friend. Our mother is there. Barbara Hillman was the bartender. And that brother I don't like to mention, Marty, he was there. Okay? And so during that time, while he was there, I received a phone call from Renee, his girlfriend. And I had called the Jack's Bar, and I had Barbara Hillman had answered the phone. She was the bartender, and I asked to speak to speak to Nolan. Anyway, I did get on the phone with Nolan. It was the first time. And I said that Renee had called and she wants you to call her. And he said, okay, I'll call her. But when he first got on the phone, he was hesitant to speak to me because he didn't know who I was, who was on the phone.
So let me stop for a minute because I just want to clarify this. You're still talking about the day of the actual crime, right?
Correct.
Right. So the day of the actual crime, you've actually had contact and communication with your brother.
Correct.
Right. So therefore, you'd be in a good position, right, to judge his mood, his behavior, the way that he was talking.
Yes.
Was there any of that concerning to you at the time? Did he sound out of breath? Did he sound like he was in the middle of something that he wasn't happy about? Or was that your normal brother talking to you, how he would normally talk to you?
It was pretty much normal how he was talking to me, except he was when he picked up the phone to find out who was on the other end. Okay, he didn't know it was me, and he said hello. And I said, what's up? He says, oh, I thought you were Luann calling. And I says, why would Luann be calling you? And he says, because she wants me to come into Reno. And he says, I don't want anything to do with her. It was she wasn't an old former girlfriend. She was just somebody that he slept with. Mm-hmm. Okay. But now he was on and moving on with his life with Renee. Okay. So that's who he thought was on the phone. And then afterwards, I gave him the message about Renee. And he says, okay, I'll give her a call. So then it was around, there was a show on back then called Alf, and my kids were young. So after the phone rang that evening, it was after the show had ended, and Renee had called me again saying that she had not heard from Nolan. I says, well, I'll call him back. I'll call him back, okay? So I says, but I'm going to give the kids a bath, and I'll call him after I'm done. So after several minutes, it was around 8:45, I guess, maybe closer to 9, I called Nolan back and to give him the message. And he said, okay, he would, I asked actually what I do. Normally I don't call and ask for Nolan when I call Jack's Bar. I actually asked for my mom.
Okay.
And they said, no, she's not here. And then she says, but her son is. Would you like to talk to him? I says, which son? She said, it's Nolan. I said, yeah, put him on. Okay, so that kind of a thing, just making sure. So anyways, that was like in the first call that I made. And in the second call, I called back and I spoke to Nolan and I asked for Nolan. Okay. So anyway, he gets on the phone and he says, okay, I'm going to call her right now. I said, okay, thanks. I hung up the phone and then that was the end of it. Okay. He called her back. Okay. So
can you recall what time that was?
It was around 8:45, 9 o'clock. It was after Alf ended at 8:30. I had to put water in the tub, give both of the kids a bath. So it took about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour to give them their baths and get them ready for bed. So that's when I called. So it was around 8:45 or so. Anyway, by the time I gave them the message, everything was fine. The next morning, I wake up and Nolan is in the living room. He was staying with me at the time. And the reason he was staying with me at the time, that brother that I won't really talk about, him and Nolan had gotten into it. Marty was being disrespectful to our mother. This was a few weeks before, and the fight ensued, and that brother cut Nolan's throat. He tried to, and he gave him a gash. So Nolan moved in with me, and my brother, the crazy one, Marty, for over 20 years has never known where I lived. Those were the conditions that I made. Family could not tell him where I lived. Friends could not tell him where I lived. So I was safe. So anyways, that's why Nolan moved in with me. So when I got up that morning on May 10th, Nolan was in the living room. He had pulled out a futon and he was putting it back, and he and I sat down and had a cup of coffee. This is now the day after the crime. And of course, the Nostradamus prediction was going to happen that day, if it was going to happen at all. And so he started finishing up part of the roof again and worked on it a little bit. And I noticed that Brandy, that was our dog, was not feeling well. And so I took her to the vets that day. She was admitted that day, and she, on the 10th of May, she didn't get out until the 12th of May. So he was up. He kind of thought I blamed him because I was mad because I told him, you should have told me sooner so I could have gotten her treatment, And so I was kind of upset with him. Anyways, but it was the day after the crime. He left for a few days, and he came back. So about 2 weeks after the crime occurred, Nolan is in Reno, and he's dropping off our brother, Marty. And he sees that person, Junior, that I had told you about.
Yep.
So he wanted to get revenge, and Nolan was that type to get revenge. And it got the better of him. He followed Junior around in Sparks, and he had dropped Marty off, and he noticed that Junior had pulled into the Payless Shoe Store shopping center. So Nolan went around, parked his car. He was going to sneak up on him, and he was going to beat his butt for what he had done. Okay? So Junior had gone into the sub shop, which is down from the Payless store. And Nolan was supposed to be meeting Renee for dinner. And what happened was he had walked past the shoe store on the way to Flaky Jake's. It was an old, like a burger place, and they had a payphone. For some of your listeners, they may not know what a payphone is, but it was something that we used to have years ago.
Oh, we used to have them here in the UK too.
Yeah, now you can't find one. So anyways, he'd gone over to Flaky Jake's, and he had used the payphone. He had called Renee, and the phone kept ringing and no answer. So he knew he was in trouble. So as he was leaving he was heading back to his car that he had parked to hide from Junior. All of a sudden he hears, "Get on the ground. Stay down. Get on the ground." And down he goes. 4 to 5 officers have him surrounded with their guns pointed on him. And now that's how he gets involved. Now he's picked up. He's taken down to the Sparks Police Department.
Can I just ask the question? Is that what he was
Sure.
was that what he was actually being picked up for? Had he been identified as a suspect? Was that the reason for them arresting him?
That was not the reason that they gave, but that was the motive behind it.
Okay.
And he wasn't arrested at that time. Okay, he wasn't arrested till 4 months later. What they did was they just they got him under a CPC, which is a civil protective custody. It was their way to get him into jail. Okay, so they had he wasn't drunk, he wasn't anything. He had followed, I told you earlier, he had followed Junior around. Junior had gone into a place not too far, a block away. And Nolan was watching him, but Junior was with some friends. So when on his way back. So Nolan had a couple of beers. He was not drunk. Okay. So anyway, during that time when Nolan was picked up for questioning, the officers, it was Stephen Asher, and some others were discussing, yeah, he's the one. He had no idea what they were talking about. He's the one. Okay. All right. And so, anyway, Nolan gets arrested. He's never given his Miranda rights, ever. They pick him up. They detain him. They take him down to the Sparks Police Department. They take him down to the Washoe County Sheriff's Office, detention. They're waiting for the main detective on the case of the May 9th armed robbery sexual assault, Detective Box, to arrive. He's out on a fishing trip or whatever, and he's on his way back. So they hold him under that CPC. Okay.
Do us a favor. Just explain so our audience understands where you're coming from. Explain what CPC is for us, please.
A CPC is a civil protective custody. It's like you're not under arrest, but if they think you might be drunk or too drunk to take care of yourself, they take you in for your own protection, and then when you sober up, they'll release you. Okay, but Nolan was not drunk, and that comes out later on during the trial. He wasn't drunk. Okay, so anyway, he meets Detective Box, and Box is telling him, "We know you did it," and it was actually Stephen Asher who told him that he was a suspect in an armed robbery sexual assault case that happened approximately 2 weeks earlier. So when Box comes in, he wants Nolan to tell him about it, right? Well, Nolan remembered the crime, and this is why he remembered it. Because this was the first time, and I even remember it and this is where I have a little bit of guilt, because about right after the crime occurred on May 9th, it was on the news. It was in the newspaper, and I recall reading the story and listening to it on the news, and we all did, because this guy called the police. He told the victims he was going to call the police and tell them about this, that he locked you in the bathroom, and he was going to call them so they can come and let you out. Okay? And I had made the comment. I said, and there was a $2,000 reward, and I had made the comment that if the guy was so desperate for money, why doesn't he just turn himself in and collect the $2,000 secret witness reward?
Yeah.
That's why Nolan remembered it when Detective Box is asking him about the reward. We all knew about it. It was the first time we've ever heard of anybody calling the police and telling them what they'd done. Okay? So now that Detective Box is telling him that we know you did it, and Nolan had information because he had heard about it. He just couldn't remember where he heard it or what the date or anything, right? And so Box wanted him to tell him the date, and he couldn't. So anyways, Box, without any Miranda by any officer, told Nolan he could not leave, not without getting his fingerprints, without getting his picture taken, and his voice. They wanted him to tape record his voice, which Nolan reluctantly had to do.
None of that would have been proper protocol or practice. You
would think so. You would think so, right? because no Miranda. And again, at trial, it was established Nolan was never given Miranda. It is totally established no Miranda rights were ever given to him. And at trial, they used all that evidence they obtained, him knowing about the secret witness, his fingerprints, his voice being recorded, and his picture taking for picture. So they all knew that. Okay. So anyways, when going back to around the 21st of May, when Nolan was picked up for questioning, all of this was done. And at that time, Officer Asher and some other officers, they had located Nolan's car, which belonged to us. And now prior to us selling the car to Nolan, we knew that the 8-track, he had an 8-track or a cassette rather in the car. So the eject button didn't work. So my husband used to either use his he had a buck knife too, or usually he just used a screwdriver to eject the tape out. Nolan used his buck knife. He had a buck knife. He worked construction. And to most people, a buck knife is a brown wooden knife with brass ends. That's your basic buck knife. Okay, that's what he owned. So when Nolan was being detained for questioning, they located his vehicle, and in it, they saw on the console his knife with the blade out. Okay, now remember, the suspect had used a knife in the crime. Okay,
I'm with you.
So they take all of this, these photos and everything, and this is all used against him at trial, and no Miranda ever given. So Detective Box gets all of this. And then Detective Box tells Nolan, well, we're going to let you go, but we want you to come back tomorrow, and we want you to come back and make a confession. And Nolan would say anything just to get out of there, right? And he says, yeah. He says, I'll come and talk to you tomorrow.
But,
okay,
at this point, have they actually told him about the weight of the crime, what they were suggesting?
Yes.
So he was aware that it was a sexual assault?
Yeah.
He was aware at this point?
Because, they told him what it was about. It was Asher who told them.
Okay.
He was Officer Stephen Asher. He would later become a chief of police of Sparks.
But at this point, if they're asking him to come back to make a confession, right? At what point did they start telling him what evidence they had actually gathered in order for them to be able to suggest that he might be guilty of this crime? I mean, they
took us.
Yeah, but irrespective of that, a sexual assault requires a visible or some sort of a witness statement that says it was him.
They had nobody. In fact, what they did tell him was that they know he had done this, and that they had they told him that they had somebody that was going to come down there.
So at this point, what recorded documentation did the police have, or could they produce that would authenticate the fact that at the time that they were suggesting that they knew he was guilty, someone had eyewitnessed, had finger pointed him, or claimed that they'd seen him at the scene of the crime? What documentation did they have, dated and timed at the time that they had him under arrest, that suggested that he was the suspect?
Absolutely nothing. They had nothing other than the fact that.
So here's the thing. So here's the thing. When you're telling someone, right, or you're bringing someone in, the next question has to be, what led the police to believe that he was the suspect? How were they able to justify that in a court of law, that they had the right to A, detain him, B, charge him, right, or arrest him, right, if they have yet to gain any statements, evidence, forensic or otherwise, to suggest that Nolan Edward Klein was responsible for the crime, or was even seen in the vicinity and was potentially a suspect in the crime?
They had when Nolan had walked past the shoe store, the victim that worked the night of the crime, the second victim, she saw him, but she was not sure that he was the guy when she called. So she didn't call the police. Another person called the police. So that's how come they showed up. Okay. And so when Nolan was picked up for questioning and he's telling them about, he had heard about the crime, that was kind of the evidence. Okay?
But
Are you there?
but by that time, half the country would have heard about the crime because it was on TV and it was in the newspapers.
Uh-oh. Hello?
Hello, I'm here.
Okay. I couldn't hear you. My phone's.
You're fine.
Oh yeah, I was having trouble with my earplugs. Okay, so what happened was, they were so positive. They just wanted to close the case. That's what it came down to. Okay, so they had told him that they had a witness that could come down and positively identify him. And now when they took that photo lineup, that picture of Nolan, they used it as a mugshot and placed it into a photo lineup. I believe I sent that to you. And if you take a look at it, he's number 3. He is the darkest photograph. He's cut off at the chin with the full beard. Everybody else is from the chest up and they're much lighter. So when the victim, Teresa, comes in, the next day, she is told by Detective Box, we picked up a suspect, we had to let him go, but I'm going to show you a photo lineup and see if maybe he's in there. And she went right to him. Now, that same photo lineup that was shown to Teresa, I have personally shown to over 160 people. And they all personally went to number 3, Nolan, without any idea what Nolan looked like or the suspect, because it's so suggestive. Today, that photo lineup is no longer being used throughout our country because it has led to wrongful convictions. That photo lineup array, the way they put it together. So the victim from April 21st, which was nobody even knew about that. That was hidden for years, even after the trial. But there was a hint there was another crime, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. That victim came down, saw Nolan, cleared Nolan. They took her to his car, cleared his car. And why is that? Because on April 21st, there was another armed robbery, attempted sexual assault, in which that victim gotten into the man's car. Okay?
Wow.
Okay? She came down and cleared him. So when Nolan left, Nolan gave the police enough information that if they figured it, it would clear him. He even gave him our mom's phone number, contact, everything to call. So when Detective Box let him go, he called the house the next morning around 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay? Looking for Nolan, telling him that he said he'd be down here. And then anyway, Nolan never didn't show up, and it was hours. He had like several hours to even get there. Nolan never showed up. He had gone home that evening, or actually it was that morning. They held him for 7 hours with no Miranda, and then they let him go. When he left, he went back to Renee's home, woke her up because she was upset. Because remember, he was supposed to be there for dinner, and he never showed. So she was very upset with him, and then he told her what had happened. They both discussed him not going back to talk to Detective Box, and that is why. And the reason is because, first of all, Nolan never registered as an ex-felon, which is a no-no. And secondly, he had that DUI charge that he called his attorney years earlier and said, I'm working out of state, you need to postpone it. Well, she never did. Okay, so he knew there was an outstanding warrant for that DUI, and Nolan had every plan to go to another state to look for work, keep it for 6 months, and send for Renee. Okay, that was the plan. So they stuck to that plan. So yes, Renee was on board. So when Nolan did return to my home after that to finish up on the roof, okay, because he was waiting for the shingles. And you have to understand, we had a lot of wind damage weeks earlier. A lot of homes were damaged. We had 100-mile-an-hour winds. So he was waiting for the shingles to come in because they were continually on back order. Finally, he gets them, and he finishes the roof. He takes off, and he goes to California, and then he returns over Memorial Day weekend. And then he leaves and goes on to work because there was no work. So he decided he was just going to leave. That was the plan, to find work and send for Renee. And so then how I find out about it is my mother worked at Denny's at the time. She worked the swing shift. And at that time, I was working a graveyard shift. And I had gone into Denny's, and my mom had come in, and she said, hey, I want you to read something, and then I'm going to come back and talk to you in a few minutes. And I said, okay. So she hands me this newspaper clipping, and I see the picture of the composite, and it's nobody that I even recognize on the composite. And now I'm reading the composite sketch, okay, from that was released to the suspect and everything. And then it talks about the April 21st crime that an unidentified detective said this was very similar to another crime that happened on April 21st on the corner of Audi and El Rancho Boulevard. Okay. And then it gets into the crime. So it doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. And so my mom comes back in and she says, so what did you think of that? And I said, well, I hope they catch him. I hope they nail his ass to the wall. And she says, they're saying that's Nolan. I says, what are you talking about, Nolan? This is not Nolan. This doesn't even look like him, because the suspect's got brown eyes. Nolan's got bright blue eyes. Nolan had a full beard the night of the crime that time. And then it kind of clicked on me. Oh my God, this is that guy we were talking about that I made the joke about of the May 9th who called the police and told him what he had done. Now it started to click. By now, Nolan is gone. Okay. So Mom said that Detective Box had been calling her work, calling her at the house, and calling her and coming into her work. And I said to her, I said, is that why I haven't been able to get a hold of you? You're not home? She says, I haven't been home. She had actually checked out of a motel because Box kept threatening her. She honestly did not know where Nolan was. And it was after that I called. I thought, I better call. I didn't call Renee. I didn't want her involved in all of this because I didn't know if she knew about it. You know what I mean? But she did. She knew the night after Nolan was picked up for questioning, but I didn't know it. So I called my other brother, the one who I was actually closest to, Steve, up in Washington. And so when I called Steve's house, his wife Peggy picks up the phone, and I asked for Steve because I was going to let him know. And she said, oh, hey, guess who's here? And I says, I don't know who. She says, Nolan. I said, he is. I said, could you put him on the phone? And then I'll talk to Steve. And she says, yeah. And then I talked to Nolan, and Nolan says, hi. And I said, hey, I just want you to know, I said, the police showed up at our house looking for you. And they wanted me to give you a message if I should speak to you. And he says, what's that? They said they want you to call them. And he said, okay, you gave me the message. And I said, are you going to call him? He says, yeah, I'm taking care of it. I will take care of it. I said, okay, that's the end of our conversations. We did not discuss it after that. And then in September, Nolan, which I did not know at the time, him and Renee had decided that Nolan was going to return to Reno right for Shane's first birthday. That's his son. And then he was going to turn himself in to the police. He knew he didn't commit this crime, but he did know that he was going to have to do some times for that failure to appear on that DUI and then not registering as an ex-felon. He figured since he couldn't find work up there, the job that he was finished and he was going to get laid off. So it was a good time to spend the winter in jail to take care of all of that. So what happened was Detective Box, who was now the man going to, do everything he can to get that arrest and conviction, doesn't matter. So anyways, Nolan comes back in September. And it was, I showed up for Shane's birthday. I didn't know that Nolan was there. I had left, Nolan had returned. And then the next thing I know, I get a call from the Washoe County Detention Center, a collect call. And it was Nolan. And I says, what's going on? He says, I got arrested. For what? That armed robbery sexual assault case. I knew he was innocent. And so he and I would go and see him, but my work schedule and everything, Nolan would call me all the time on the phone, and then we would discuss it. I didn't see him that often. And I do believe you do have a copy of the sign-in sheets of all the people in those 5 months that came to visit him from the time he was arrested up until he went to prison after the trial. And so you'll see that I've come up, and you'll see that the trial began on January 23rd. 1989. And if you also look at that sign-in sheet, you will see that Shelley O'Neill came to see him January 22nd, the day before the trial began. That was Nolan's public defender, Shelley O'Neill, who would later on to commit perjury during a 1991 post-conviction hearing. We'll get into that later. But that's pretty much how we got into all of this, and then after that, now we get into this the system of all of this.
Whoa.
Okay,
Whoa,
so
boss.
let's just stop and breathe in here, because there's just so much information to absorb in all of that. But for me, I just want to pause that there for a second and just really take a real closer look at some of the moves pulled by the police to fast track an arrest, charge, and potential conviction when no statement, no forensic evidence, no proof was.
Oh, no. There was no real statement. However, when he was picked up for questioning, when he's answering about this crime, Detective Box wouldn't tell him the date, so he couldn't give him an alibi as to where, he was on May 9th. He knew about it because he had heard about it. So they used that part about it, except for the date. So at trial, it was like, oh, he knew about the robbery. He knew there was a $2,000 secret witness reward. We all knew about it. In fact, and so while Nolan was up in Washington, our mother.
So what was it? What was they trying to suggest was significant about Nolan knowing about the $2,000 reward? What significance did that have in attaching any form of guilt to him?
Nothing, other than that he knew about it. So he must have been keeping an eye on the crime and checking the newspapers and so on and so forth. I don't know. But really, there shouldn't have been that much of anything on the secret witness. You understand, he never would have remembered the reward, or me, or anybody else, if it hadn't have been for the guy, which later on we'll find out who he is. Because, like I said, I started my own investigation. It was put into a post-conviction. Do you remember that newspaper clipping that I told you that my mother asked me to read?
Yep.
Detective Box, when he went to see her, he wouldn't even tell her. Only that, wouldn't tell her the date or when it happened. So my mom went to Sparks and started looking at all the newspaper articles in the paper from the time that for the last few weeks. And then she came across it because she knew it was the Payless Shoe Store. And it was an armed robbery, sexual assault. So she took that newspaper clipping, and that's the one that she showed me. That's the one she admitted to, gave to Nolan's public defender, Shelley O'Neill, and that was what was admitted at trial. Shelley O'Neill never looked into that April 21st crime. So that right there told me something. And then when I looked after the trial was over, I looked at the evidence. I noticed on the exhibit list that was not to go to the jury. So the jury never knew that April 21st crime was tied into the May 9th crime. And I thought to myself, but I didn't know it at the time. I thought to myself, did the jury think that Nolan already got convicted for the April 21st crime? I didn't know that they never saw the newspaper article because it was withheld.
That would have been a hell of a lot of confusing, because if there are connections and ties to both crimes.
Right. And that April 21st never even came into play during the trial. And Shelley never looked into it. Had she looked into it, this is what she would have discovered for April 21st. She would have discovered, because this all came out during the post-conviction proceedings when Nolan's attorney, Joe Plater, subpoenaed the records from the Sparks PD. That's how we learned about who April 21st was. That woman came down the night of the questioning, cleared Nolan, cleared his car. She was the one who was in the car. She identified it as a possible 67 Bonneville with a bench seat. And for those who don't know what a bench seat is, it is a front seat that's straight across. Nolan had a 67 Impala with buckets and a console. So there was some similarities there, but they're wrong vehicles. Okay? One's a bench, one is not. But she cleared Nolan's car. So the thing is, that victim could not nobody could know about her because it wouldn't look good for the prosecution to have this woman coming in and clearing Nolan, now would it? So they hid it. Also, what I found in the report on April 21st is that victim said that the man used a knife, a red and black knife, handled knife. Okay? Now,
nothing like the buck knife that they
correct.
pulled out of his van.
However, it was similar to the May 9th crime because in that we got those victim statements that, Shelley O'Neill didn't even check out. They said the victim's knife used in the weapon was red and black.
Wow.
Identical to the April 21st crime. Nolan was never charged with, but was cleared that was hidden. Shelley didn't even look into it.
Here's a quick question for you. Whatever happened with that May 21st crime?
The April 21st crime?
Yeah, the April 21st crime. Was anybody else ever charged for that crime?
No, because you know what else came out at the post-conviction proceedings? Was that when it came out, there was a police report, which you do have, on a suspect. He was their prime suspect named Ricky Lee Zarsky.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got that paperwork.
Okay. Do you have it? Do you mind reading that report?
I haven't got it handy, but if you've got it, can you read it? I'd have to go and dig into this.
I'm trying to see if I can find it. But anyways, I'll look for it. I mean, I have it. It's in the other book I can get.
Yeah.
But anyway, that April 21st crime victim. So they both. Okay, so back to. I'm sorry. I'm looking for that report. I got baffled, but I will find it.
I'm trying to quickly search for it myself. Yeah, I've got.
Okay.
But it's not coming up. I'm just looking for it.
It has a report with a black line through it because it gives his
the one
birthday.
with Zarsky?
Zarsky, that's it.
Okay, 1 second. Let's have a look. You carry on talking while I just look into this.
Okay. So, anyways, this report came out after the trial. And so during the post-conviction proceedings, and at this time, Nolan's public defender, there was several grounds of ineffective assistance of counsel. Nolan had raised that there was another suspect because that newspaper clipping that was given to Shelley that talked about April 21st is that the theory of an unidentified detective was that they were committed by the same person, but Nolan had only been convicted of their one crime. Okay?
Wow.
Okay, so that's why the records were.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, when Plater comes out, Joe Plater, I'm standing in the hallway of the courthouse. Joe Plater comes out and he says to me, he says, Tanya, he says, do you remember you saying there was another suspect? I said, yeah, there had to be another. He says, there is. He's got a name, Zarsky. I said, do you think Shelley knew? He says, oh, no, she had no way of knowing, but I'm going to go ask her now. So Shelley would commit perjury about this. If you read that, when you read that report, pay close attention to it, because Shelley said in her testimony that she had her investigator check it out. And then she also said that she saw the report and she had to rule it out because he was in custody in another state, so he could not have committed the crime. But the report doesn't say that. It says he matches the composite by several officers. Not only that, they went to the Nevada plasma, the Reno plasma, because he was selling his blood. And he matches their photographs of Zarsky. Okay. They had the bartender where he was staying at the Abbey Hotel.
What I'm looking at, I'm looking at the Sparks Police Department. Is that the one that I'm looking for in talking with Mr. Little?
Yeah, I mean, I can find it.
It says,
real
in talking with Mr. Little, he advised us that Mr.
Yes,
Zarsky was not home, and when he returned home this morning after working graveyard, Mr. Zarsky had left with two of his friends. Mr. Little advised us that he left for work on the 5th of the 9th, 88 at approximately 2100 hours and did not return home until the 5th of the 10th, 88 at approximately 0830 hours. Mr. Little advised us that Mr. Zarsky had planned to give plasma today in Reno at the Reno Plasma Center. Detective Box and I then went to Nevada Plasma Center located on 2nd Street in Reno to attempt to locate Mr. Zarsky. We made contact with the nursing supervisor at Nevada Plaza, and she pulled the records on Mr. Zarsky and advised us that Mr. Zarsky had not been at Nevada Plaza since 1984. Nevada Plaza has a picture of Mr. Zarsky, but it is dated in 1984. Detective Box and I then went to Reno Plasma Center located on 2nd Street in Reno to attempt to locate Mr. Zarsky. At this plasma center, We again made contact with the nursing supervisor and inquired if Mr. Zarsky was there. The nursing supervisor brought us Mr. Zarsky's file and told us he had not been there yet today. Reno Plasma also did have a picture of Mr. Zarsky, but it was dated in 1986. The nursing supervisor also advised us that the last time Mr. Zarsky had been in there to give plasma was on the 4th of 88. Both of the photographs that I observed from Nevada Plasma and Reno Plasma did resemble the composites that were done in these cases. I then returned to the Abbey Hotel and again made contact with Mr. Zarsky's roommate, Mr. David Little, to inquire how many times, to his knowledge, that Mr. Zarsky had given plasma. Mr. Little advised me that he only knows of one other time, other than today, that Mr. Zarsky has given plasma in the last 2 months. And again, Mr. Zarsky was not at home and Mr. Little had no idea where he was. I then went to the bartending area where I made contact with an individual who identified himself as being the manager of the area and asked him if he observed Mr. Zarsky come back, would he please notify this department. That's the end of that report.
No, there's one more line. It says this is a supplemental.
Sorry, yeah, this is a supplement to case 884892. No further details.
That case number is April 21st.
This is a supplement to case. That's the April the 21st case?
April 21st. That's the victim who came down, cleared Nolan, cleared his car, who identified the person as being having a red and black knife, the same as May 9th. Right. So now you know that everybody, Detective Box, and you can look at the bottom of the page, it's got Asher's name on it.
Yep.
Yeah. So now they have this suspect, you see. So they couldn't have that April 21st person coming into trial because that woman cleared Nolan right down to the, you see what I mean? So the DA didn't turn it over. And Shelley at post-conviction proceedings said that he could not have committed the crime because she saw the report because he was in custody in another state. Did that report say anything about him being in custody in another state? No. It says he was their guy. He disappeared the day after the crime. So you're going to love this part, trying to prove his innocence. So what I did was, you know that he worked at the Carl Silver Club. I then, after I got that report, I went to the Carl Silver Club to see if he returned, if he was there. I went to the personnel department and I asked to speak to someone about Zarsky, and they said, we really can't give you, information. I said, well, I'm his ex-wife, and we have children, and he has not paid child support. And she says, and she had, prior to that, she had said, no, he said he never showed up for work. He left the last time he had checked out. In fact, she says, we still have his paycheck here. And I asked for it. I said, could I have it? She says, no, by law, I cannot give it. We're legally obligated to hold the paycheck for so many years. I think it was 7 years. And I says, well, I'm his ex-wife and he hasn't paid child support. And I could really use the money. And they said, no, that's how I got that information, by claiming I was Zarsky's ex-wife. But I know that check was there 3 years after the crime. He never sent for it, and he never picked it up.
But the bottom line is that just blows your mind, really, doesn't it? Why wouldn't you go back for your paycheck? Correct.
And something else that I discovered. Back now, with the internet, so it would be many years later, I did a Google search on Zarsky, or not a Zaba search. I paid somebody because I actually have his social security number. So I paid a company, gave him a social security number, and it gives all his names and where he's lived over the last several years. Okay? After the crime occurred, Zarsky, up until that time, he started to change the name of his name. He kept the same social security name, but he changed the spelling of his name in different ways. Wow. Okay, so he was hiding. Now he's using his name because the statute of limitations ran out years ago. And then I will tell you, because I know that we're going to be running out of time, and we can get into that on how I did find Zarsky 2 years after Nolan died. And I will get into that if we get the time. So anyways, at the post-conviction hearing, okay, I went ahead and Nolan filed the work. The decisions which you have came out. Basically, Judge McGee, which was the trial judge, he is now the post-conviction judge, okay, in the case. He gives some lame excuse for denying the petition. He makes no mention whatsoever, about Zarsky, about the April 21st or anything. He gives a dumb excuse about the beard evidence. Now, remember, I told you that Nolan had a full beard when he was picked up for questioning. It was used in the photo lineup. Nolan was arrested in September. When he was arrested in September, Nolan had what would be best described as a beard stubble, the same as the composite sketch. And I could never figure out why Shelley O'Neill never brought up the beard evidence. She knew about it. I gave her the names of witnesses like Flo Kimball, who saw Nolan, mistaking Nolan for Robert. I gave her other people's names too. Carla Marsh, Cindy Haas. These were people who did not socialize with Nolan. They knew him through me, like my son's birthday party where Nolan attended. They saw him, and this was in April of 1988, Nolan having a full beard. So we would have been able to establish that Nolan had a full beard from April up until he was picked up for questioning. He had a full beard. Carla was able to establish through her testimony that when she met Nolan in April at Robbie's birthday party, he had a beard, and the time she saw him again in May, which was I had a tonsillectomy taken out in May. Nolan was going to bring me home, but I had made plans for Carla to do so. That the only difference between April and May was that Nolan's beard had gotten longer. So now he's got about approximately a 2 to 3 inch beard. And when Nolan was picked up for questioning, it was a few days after my tonsillectomy. And Nolan at that time, when I was having my tonsils out, I hadn't eaten in 2 days and I was hungry. And he had just learned that my husband had a beard trimmer. So he asked if he could trim his beard. And I said, okay, but it was going to cost you. And I had him make me breakfast because I was hungry. And then he went in and he trimmed his beard. But in that photo lineup, you can see he's got a full beard. It's just trimmed. But prior to that, in the 16th of 18th of May, because that's when he trimmed it, it was much longer. That does not even compare to that composite sketch where he had a 2 to 3 day old stubble. So what happened was when Shelley O'Neill was testifying during the 91 hearing, she got it reversed. She said, according to the booking picture, he had a stubble, and that's why she got her reference from, was looking at the booking picture. That's why she didn't present the beard evidence. She should have looked at the photo lineup taken in May, not the one in September. And the interesting part is that I did talk to one of Nolan's jurors after the trial in 1990. I recognized her from the jury, and the reason she caught my eye was during the trial. She stood up. She was a female. She walked in. She sat up. She was on the top row of where the jury sits. She looked over. She was wearing this multicolored sweater. She looked over at me, gave me a smile, like everything's going to be okay. Okay? The jury went into deliberations. They were deadlocked. The jury could not make a decision until Judge McGee gave them 2 testimonies to be read back, 2 defense witnesses, Bill Richards and Barbara Hillman, who was the bartender. The judge said it was going to cost too much money to have both testimonies transcribed. He's going to give them Bill's, Richards. So the jury was sent home. The next day they came back into the courtroom, and when they read the trial transcripts back, Bill Richards' transcripts, that juror would put her head down, not even look at me. They went into the jury room. They came back out within about 10, they gave notice about 10 minutes later, but it took longer to find Nolan's public defender than it did for them to make a decision. So we had to wait for Shelley to return to hear the verdict. This woman would not even look at me. That's why I recognized her. So then they found him guilty. So a year later, nearly that same year, but not quite a year later, I saw this woman. She just got hired as the new assistant district attorney in Carson City. Ann Langer was her name. Not knowing if she would talk to me or not, I called her and she talked to me. So I found out what it was, why the jury convicted Nolan. And they too did the same thing. I asked her, I said, did you know that Nolan had a full beard the night of the crime? And she says, no, we didn't know that. They just knew by the time he was arrested, he could have plenty of time to have grown one. She got the booking picture and the photo lineup reversed, just like Shelley O'Neill did. That's what it came down to. Wow. She also said that she said they found Nolan guilty was because when Nolan had taken Teresa out of the bathroom into the storeroom, she was able to get a good look at him before he raped her. Okay? Now, here's the problem with that. And this was put into a post-conviction petition. Okay, all the stuff, everything the jury's she told me as a juror why the jury found him guilty. The problem with that is this. When Zarsky, when the suspect brought the girls into the bathroom, okay, they were able to lock it from the inside, okay? And I guess he put stuff up against it. But anyways, he came back a few minutes later. He knocked on the door. Bridget unlocked the door, and he says, come out here. And Bridget started. He said, no, I want her, which was Teresa. They walk into the storeroom. When he brought her back into the storeroom, the lights were off. But she could tell that the store lights were on by the light coming in from under the door. But the storeroom lights were off. The jury thought the lights were on. That's why she was able to get a good, she couldn't see anything. She says it was dark, she couldn't see anything. So the jury misunderstood what they thought they heard. They thought the lights were on because in the beginning of Teresa's testimony, the storeroom lights were on. He put him into the bathroom. So so that was it. And then the other reason they found Nolan guilty was this.
Just one second. Before we go on to that, in most cases where juries have a query, when you're talking about someone's life, because he was ended up sentenced to 2 life sentences to run consecutive, right, or concurrent, right?
Yeah.
Right.
He was about 40.
Surely you'd want to clarify that. You weren't sure. Why wasn't there any clarification asked for by the jury? Because the juries normally ask for clarification, don't they?
Yeah, well, you would think, and now comes to the third, another main reason why they were deadlocked. Now, when you are deadlocked, that means juries some's holding out for not guilty.
Yeah.
Okay. So this plays a crucial factor into the decision making. So Ann Langer, who was now an assistant district attorney, who is now, right now, the Story County district attorney in another county. Anyways, she said that when I asked her, I said, why did you want Bill Richards' testimony to be read back by Bill's and Barbara's, but you were only given Bill's? And she says, well, we wanted to hear back. And she says, and the other reason we found Nolan guilty was because we believed Bill Richards was being truthful. He was being credible. We just believed he was mistaken as to the time Nolan left the bar. So instead of it being around like 10:30 as he testified to it in trial, we believed that maybe it was around 8:30 because he had talked about the sun going down when Pinky, that's my mom, and JD left the bar to go to dinner. So we assumed back then that the sun set around 8:30 in the evening, which would have given Nolan enough time to drive to Sparks at 9:15 and commit the crime.
So here, let's pause again. When we're talking about time clarification and certification, and we're talking about they had a discrepancy, whereas Bill Richardson said that it was 9:30, and they believed that he might have been mistaken, and it could have been 8:30 because they have the discrepancy is what time the sun would have gone down. Why wasn't anybody asking, can we just go back and check what was sunset, what was sundown on that particular date and time to clarify whether or not Bill Richardson could have been mistaken?
Well, actually, Bill Richards testified he was there until 10:30. The reason they wanted both testimonies and was Barbara Hillman, who was the bartender. She was the most logical person to have those transcripts transcribed, but McGee wouldn't give it to them. She said Nolan was there from the time her shift began at 6 o'clock until after 10 p.m. Okay? Bill Richards testified Nolan was there and that he had left first, okay? And it was, he remembered looking at his clock, at his watch, and it was after 10:30. So they just figured that Bill made the honest mistake. If Judge McGee would have given him both testimonies as they requested, there wouldn't have been no confusion as to what time Nolan left. And if anything, he should have given him Barbara because she was the only one who wasn't drinking. They believed Bill was being honest and truthful. They just thought he was mistaken. Now, if they would have given, like I said, Barbara's, he was there till after 10. The crime occurred at 9:15, 35 miles away. He calls the police at 10:19 and tells them what he does. And he doesn't say he rapes anybody. What he says in the 911 call is this. He says, the Payless shoe store over on Prater and McCarran? The operator says, yeah. And she says, well, you might want to go over. And he says, I just robbed the place and I locked them in the bathroom if you want to go over and let them out. He says nothing about rape whatsoever. Now, I do believe that I did send you the handwritten medical report of the examining doctor on Teresa. Yeah. During trial, that doctor, Dr. Schenk, testified his report was accurate. That report was never turned over in discovery. It was turned over as Shelley O'Neill was about to cross-examine the doctor. She didn't even catch it. But if you look at it, it says there was no penetration, no oral, no sodomy. There was no rape. Okay? That too was raised in the post-conviction. Shelley doesn't, when they ask the question about the penetration, she doesn't really give an answer. It's Judge McGee who's actually coming up with the answer for her, and all she's saying is, yes, agreeing with him, his interpretation of it, okay? Now, if you take a look, now let's fast forward it to 2 years after Nolan dies. I contacted a private investigator to locate Zarsky. I found him. I had found Zarsky, but I contacted a private investigator in that state to contact him. And he interviewed him, and I have all the reports on that. But I will tell you this, what Zarsky did say. I had the opportunity. Zarsky wanted to meet with me, and I had the opportunity to go there, and I had an opportunity to listen to what this man said. And I won't get into all the details, but I will tell you this. He said that he knew he was a suspect in 4 crimes, and that he never raped nobody. I believe him. And
because there was no rape.
Yeah, was it about the money? See, at trial, Teresa testified she didn't know who she was suing. Excuse me, you don't know that you're suing that defendant? You know darn well who you're suing, don't you? Okay, so when I had the opportunity to listen to what Zarsky had to say, okay, here's the interesting thing. He said that he knew he was a suspect in the 4 crimes. Well, it's like 4 crimes, but Nolan was only charged with 1 crime, the Payless shoe store crime. Okay? That's 1. That was the May 9th crime. At the post-conviction proceedings, when the evidence was seized that came out, there were other police reports that came out that the DA had. And that was, there were 4 crimes. There was the crime from November 1987. There was a crime from, I didn't have the date, but there was a statement from Terry Colgrove. Stand
by.
A clothing station.
Yeah, stand by. Stop. Yeah, stand by. We're getting some interference. You're totally breaking up, going robotic. Try again.
Hello.
Yeah, again, we're getting some. I can hear you, but we're getting some interference on the line. So
yeah, it all broke up. Yeah, all broke up.
We're clear. Teresa's clear, but you're not. So we're obviously getting some interference. And we're used to this type of behavior. So
yeah,
we're not surprised.
This may happen, right?
Yeah, you're getting into it, Tonja. Somebody doesn't want you to get this truth out.
Spot on.
Are you still there, Tonja?
And that's exactly out. Oh, did we lose her?
Hi, Tonja. Are you there? Tonja? Yep, it looks like we're losing her.
We lost.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut her out here and I'm going to bring her back. All right. So guys,
okay,
just stand by.
And we were listening. We knew this would happen today. We knew this story was so powerful, and it. we knew, and I even mentioned that, don't be surprised, because when something is really true that we try to get out to the people, there always seems to be huge interference. It seems like there's always some type of interference on every show, but some that totally black out, like this one.
Yeah, we've had it with you. We've had it with Royce Eckley. We're getting it with Tonja Brown now. This is an absolutely intriguing and very powerful story that we're definitely going to be having a part 2 on. We're working very hard to bring Tonja back online. We've still got at least 25 minutes that we can try and get her on. I'm not sure, TJ, if you could possibly try and get her on a landline and tell her to try again. Yep.
I'm on it, boss.
Yeah,
I'm on it.
I'm trying to bring her back in again as we speak. We've got a tremendous audience who are quietly waiting. But when you imagine that we're talking about a woman who is fighting for the integrity of her brother, who has already passed away whilst incarcerated for a crime he did not commit. I find it, as Patrick Lane has just said, he applauds this woman's determination to dig in for the long haul in fighting for her brother for all of this time. When you're bearing in mind that he's passed over 10 years now. But we are still working hard in the background on trying to bring her back. I do believe that TJ is trying to get her on a landline to see what the difficulty might be. At this moment in time, it looks like she's lost all connection. I am going to keep on trying to get her back on because we really want to get to the end of this. I can guarantee you, the listening audience, listening in and tuning in worldwide, that we are definitely having a part 2 of this show. Whatever happens here, there is still so much. I mean, I have got something like 50 to 60 emails of information on this particular case. And Anne-Marie Grant says the DA offered to drop the tape charges, the most serious ones. Why? And guess what Nolan said? Hell no, because he was innocent. The DA knew the doc's report said no penetration. That's why the DA hid that from Nolan's defense, and they didn't want the truth to come out. Very true. And the bottom line is, when there is that medical evidence to confirm that there was no sexual assault, that there was no penetration, it was a simple and straightforward case of robbery, and bearing in mind that Nolan was 35 miles away when the incident took place, and furthermore there were telephone calls that took place between him and Tonja while the crime was being committed. And here's the thing for me: if you had just committed this heinous crime that people are trying to accuse you of, would you be answering your phone to family members that your behavior would? I don't care who you are, your behavior would change. You're in the middle of a crime. You've just committed a crime. You've done a terrible thing. You're going to be huffing and puffing and panting. You're going to be panicking. You're going to be concerned that people are going to be able to detect a change in your mood and temperament. Your conversation is going to be a bit iffy, suspect to say the very least. And those that know you most are going to be able to identify that something ain't right. I will just let you know for now that Tonja is currently rebooting a computer to try and get rid of whatever the bugs were, and it's currently not allowing her to reboot. But we are, if you guys can be patient with us, we are going to give her the time to try and reboot and get back on if we can, because I think Tonja's got so much more to share with us today. I think we owe her that respect. She can't reboot. Okay. Ask her to try again. So excuse me because I'm talking and typing at the same time. And this is exactly as TJ has just pointed out. This is exactly what happened when we tried to do the. Calls ended. Let's just try that again, shall we? I've also just lost. I've lost TJ as well. So yeah, it's all gone, Pete Tong. So guys, I'm not sure what we're going to be able to do. Maybe I can bring Patrick or somebody else in who wants to come in live on this. Bear with me as I'll end that. I'm just gonna have to do this, aren't I? Bear with us, guys. Let's add somebody else to this group. Patrick, I'm gonna bring you in if I can. Just to try and sum up some stuff that we were talking about. Let's just do this, shall we? Calling you now, Patrick. Let's just see if we can get a response. Anybody else there? Just wonder. I don't know who else we got on. Who we can get in there, but I'm getting no answer from TJ. I'm getting no answer from Tonja. Okay, so we got Patrick Lane, and TJ's been booted off as well. So Patrick, we were talking about the political side of things and what was the current state of the political scene at that time.
Yes, I remember it well. It was tension was rife throughout the entire presidential campaign. It was the one, if you recall, with the I believe it was the Willie Brown ad that they labeled the caucus as being soft on crime and letting Willie Brown out on a furlough. So we had a situation where the United States was very much in the midst of a feeling of having to be tough on crime, and at the same time, we also have to take into account that we had crack had begun its infestation of poorer neighborhoods at this time. So that was the tenor of the country, and that election particularly centered around law and justice and being tough on crime. So I can see how people like Nolan, and they had to be thousands, if not tens of thousands more like him, that have that got caught up in all of that fervor.
So
hi, we're back.
Okay, come on in. I'm just trying to get hold of Scott as we speak.
Oh, okay.
Guys, Tonja, come back in if you can.
Oh, can you hear me now? Because I'll finish this up because I know we're out of time, but I want to get to two areas.
Oh no,
okay?
we still got over 15 minutes left.
Okay. Well, anyways, we'll finish up the short story. Okay. I found Zarsky. Okay, after Nolan died. Anyway, over the years, I've tried to prove his innocence. Now, after the trial began in 1989, I went down to the Washoe County Courthouse because I wanted to see the evidence because I had given it to Shelley. And it's like, did it ever get presented? And there was a situation that.
Yeah, sorry, we got you, Scott. We got you, Scott. Just let Tonja finish in there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Nolan had told me about the DA's expert on DNA testing. People didn't know is that Nolan had heard about DNA testing. He asked to have DNA testing conducted before the trial began. We were told it was going to get done, and then Shelley said that it's going to cost too much money. They don't have the money. The DA's office is going to do it. So by the time the trial started, we would learn that we didn't get tested. But the state's expert, Dave Atkinson, he testified and leaving questions open. So did it get tested or not? So Nolan asked me if I could go down to and talk to Maria Fawcett at the Washoe County Crime Lab because she was supposed to be our expert on the testing. And Shelley said she didn't test anything and that her boss did and that he was going to testify. Anyways, after my conversation with Dave Atkinson, because he wouldn't let me speak to Maria Fawcett, something was bothering me. So I went down to the Washoe County Courthouse, not knowing if I could look at the evidence or not. And guess what? I was able to see it. So I went down a couple of times and I saw the evidence. I looked through it. That's how I found that exhibit list, that newspaper clipping was withheld from trial. And I couldn't find everything in there. So I obtained, I had Dick Dewar, he was the guy, supervisor of the evidence room. He photocopied some of the evidence for me. Okay. And what didn't make any sense was that there was a large manila envelope and it still had red evidence, marked evidence tape on the envelope. It was sealed up and it was initialed. It's like, if they tested it, how come the seal's not broken? Right? So it raised the question, was it really tested or not? So I had photocopies made of some of the evidence, and I had photographs taken of the evidence, and I have sent those pictures to you. So this is in 1989. Let's fast forward it to 1995. The reason being 1995 is because that post-conviction proceedings, Judge McGee, Nolan raised 33 grounds in the post-conviction proceedings. Out of that, the judge only left 23 grounds unaddressed. So all the grounds dealing with the jury as to why they found Nolan guilty, okay, and other information, he never addressed. To this day, no court has ever addressed why the jury found Nolan guilty, because had they, he would have received a new trial, okay? And so about the Zarski issue, when the report came in, see what happened was when Nolan appealed it to the federal court gave Judge McGee the opportunity to address those 23 grounds. He really didn't do it. And so in 1995, he issued the order. And when he talks about Zarski, he said, well, Mr. Klein should have raised that. He should have raised that claim in his post-conviction petition. And I said, I knew he had, because how else did we know about Zarski? It came from the report, because he said that newspaper clipping talked about April 21st, so there had to have been another person. So that's what led me going back to the evidence in 1995. In 1995, I go to look at the evidence, and that envelope that was marked with red tape, evidence and signed, that was never open. Yes. You have another copy. It's the same envelope. Now it's been open. And the chain of custody records indicate it never left the courthouse, but the DA's office did it, signed out for it. So I filed a police report. It was assigned to the detective, and then I was instructed to go and view the evidence one last time before he finalized this report to the DA's office, which I did. I went back in November of 1995. But prior to that, Nolan had heard about the Innocence Project, Barry Sheck and the Innocence Project, and he wrote me a letter. I called the Innocence Project. I left him a message on October 31st, 1995. They called me back, okay, because I wanted to find out information. So right after that, in November, I went to view the evidence one last time per instructed Dave Jenkins' instructions. I discovered that the cigarette filters were now missing. And in 1989, Dick Dewar took photocopies with the cigarettes with the filters intact, and now they're missing. So now I had to file a brand new police report. And so, because Jenkins said he had finalized it and sent it to the DA, and I said, why did you do that? I didn't even have a chance to look at it, and it was done. So I called the Sparks Police Department, and I talked to Detective Niall Carson. Niall Carson, I tell him that I discovered that the filters are missing, and Jenkins had already submitted his report, and I needed to file a brand new police report. And he said, don't do anything right now. He says, I'll get back to you. And this is now in December. And I didn't hear anything, nothing. So then in January, I filed a brand new police report about the missing filters. I got a card back signed by one of the officers who signed for it because I said it's certified return receipt. Still nothing. So in 1996, the Barry Sheck and the Innocence Project out of New York accepted Nolan's case. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, the newspaper, Nevada Appeal, did a story on the news on the case. So then I called to check on where the status of the missing filters complaint was. Nobody at the Reno PD had no knowledge of it. I said, well, excuse me, but an officer signed for it. Do you have this officer? And they said, yes. But they couldn't find it. They said, all we have is a closed 1995 case. I said, well, that's the tampering of the evidence. I discovered the missing filters after that report was done. They said, we don't have one. So then I called Detective Niall Carsons. He returned the call and he told me what had happened. He says, I have your complaint sitting on my desk. And I said, well, you said you were going to get back to me. And he says, I contacted the judge, the court, Judge Mills Lane, and he wanted me to hold off on the complaint until he became head of the court. And then we'll do it. And he says, I wrote him a letter. And I said, okay. Can I have a copy of the letter? Because the Innocence Project has taken on Nolan's case. And I believe I may have sent that to you, the letter from Carson to Mills Lane. But in it, it says it makes a reference to the above case. That above case is the close case. So what happened is that by that letter shows that Niall Carsons conspired with Judge Mills Lane to cover up the disappearance of the missing filters by putting it onto that closed 1995 case where I discovered somebody to open up the envelopes. Okay? All right. We're going to fast forward because we're running out of time.
We do, and I also do want to bring in, as we've managed to get in Scott and Patrick, I do believe that they're probably going to have something that they want to contribute. So I do want to give them an opportunity to get in and if they can, okay?
Okay. So I'll fast forward it 10 years to 2008. Nolan is dying. He's now being placed on the pardons board for a compassionate pardon because he's dying. All right? Okay, so prior to this, Dick Gamick, who's now the Washoe County District Attorney, he says that he gives an interview, and now he reveals what happened to the missing DNA. Because in 1998, we had a hearing where now Joe Plater, back in 98, he says he's now representing us in this case. But his attitude had changed, and I could not figure out why. He refused to do certain things. He wouldn't call the witnesses, so on and so forth. Well, I found out later why. He actually was he went to work for the DA's office before the final order was issued.
My gosh.
He kept it a secret. So now in 2008, Gamick says, well, I know what happened that. We opened up the envelope and we tested it. He just revealed they tested the missing filters, right? So this was now placed before the pardons board. The pardons board has this information. They still deny Nolan a pardon. Wow. He's going to remain in prison and die.
I want to hold you there, Tonja, because we are definitely going to be doing a part 2. Right? Absolutely doing a part 2. There is just so much more information to go on. I think people are just gobsmacked by the wealth and depth of information you provided so far. I just want to give first Patrick an opportunity to finish off what you were saying about the political climate at the time, and then Scott's in to come in, and then I'm going to get you to finish up again if I can. Go ahead, Patrick.
I'm just enthralled by Tonja's story, about Nolan's story. I can't wait to hear more of it. But I think it's really important as this movement goes forward that we have to look backwards, and we have to get those people that have also been wronged by the system. I mean, I think that is so important to what the steps we want to take.
Absolutely. And I'm working on that.
Oh, and I applaud you so much. I'm so impressed, and you've encouraged me so much just with your tenacity and determination, how you have dug in for the long haul. You really have given me hope today in my own fight and in this fight going forward. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Scott, I do believe that you wanted to come in.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. First thing, Tonja, you're just an amazing tower of strength, and I'm very impressed at the research you've done. Not easy fighting that blue wall of silence, and you are tearing it down brick by brick. I agree with everything Patrick said, and my heart goes out to you. One specific thing that I was outraged was the story of the photos. The BS from the lineup, the photos, which you pointed out.
Yeah.
That kind of BS has to end. And in summary, team, Tonja, I'm impressed, and I'm overwhelmed at your fight. So good on you. That's all.
Oh, thank you. I will tell you on that photo lineup. I have back in 2007, the Advisory Commission on the Administration of Justice was enacted through the legislature, and so I have been attending those commission hearings for all these years. That photo lineup came into play during 2007, and so that photo lineup kind of was instrumental in showing the commission how wrongful identification comes into play when you have photo lineups like that. Nevada no longer uses that photo lineup array, nor other law enforcement throughout the country.
That's awesome. Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
We're going to be looking, and again, once TJ is still struggling to get back in, she's rebooted her computer. We've managed to get her in the call 3 times, and every time she's come in, I've seen her, but she can't hear anything, and we obviously can't hear her. So, unfortunately, go on.
Okay. Could I quickly say something and then
absolutely?
Okay. So I want to tell you where I'm at right now, real quick, because we only got just a couple of minutes left. I still pursue this, and through the Advisory Commission on the Administration of Justice last October, the Jennifer Noble with the Washoe County District Attorney's Office. She represents the district attorneys for the state of Nevada. She stated that the Washoe County District Attorney, Chris Hicks, had implemented a conviction integrity committee to look into wrongful convictions. And Justice Hardesty asked her to give them some statistics and everything else. That has not been done yet. So in the meantime, I went ahead and submitted Nolan Klein's case to the Public Integrity, Conviction Integrity Committee. I got an answer from her in February this year denying it that, oh no, and she makes a reference to the jury.
I just heard Curvin say you can't get off.
I'm not on. I'm totally kicked off.
Right, we can hear you. TJ, we can hear you. You're coming in loud and clear.
Brian, I've been kicked off, and so was
TJ, we can hear you.
I can't even pull up here. I can't even pull it up.
All right, let me just put on.
It shows I'm on. Oh.
Are you there?
Yeah, go ahead. I've just had to cut her out because she can't hear us.
So basically, she makes a reference to the jury. You do have that letter. We can talk about that next time. But what it comes down to is she's making a reference to the jury. And to me, it's BS, because no time has any court ever addressed what the reason was about Nolan Klein's and the jury. When that federal court sent that case back to McGee, the district attorney's office argued on all those claims dealing with the jury, procedurally barred, and the courts upheld it. For her to say the jury, if she had gone, all she did was look at the previous court orders, and we can discuss about that later, but the previous court orders, that's how they determine whether they're going to take a case or not. And those court orders have inaccurate and false information in them. They need to go into the petitions, original petitions that are filed by defendants, like in Nolan's case. Had she had done that, and there's no doubt in my mind she did not do that, because she certainly couldn't come back with the jury, say that the jury, 100 peers, they heard the evidence. They didn't hear the evidence, because if they had, they wouldn't have been deadlocked. They would have had an issue there, and those claims would have been addressed. So the fact that the jury misunderstood what they thought they heard, them being deadlocked and the judge not giving them, because everything dealing with judicial error, because that was a claim as well, about the jury being deadlocked, never addressed to this day either.
Here's the thing. We have just under 60 seconds left in order before we finish.
I am back, boss.
Yeah, I can hear you, TJ. What I will say is, 1 second, TJ. What I will say is this: in part 2, I really want part 2 to be centered around the trial, around the information that was submitted to the trial, the jury's understanding and perception of what took place, and the outcome of that. We really need to focus on what went on in the trial, as to understand how it was possible that an innocent man with all that insufficient evidence to convict him, still convicted.
May I say something quickly before we go off air?
Of course you can.
Okay, so a lot of the testimony and everything that dealt with the procedures is in our book, To Prove His Innocence, by Mary Elizabeth Morgan. It is on Amazon. You can get it that way. And there is a lot of information in there. There's a lot of the testimony in there. So that will actually help you and your viewers. It's got a picture of Nolan while in prison. He's smiling. And the reason I have him smiling is because the suspect said he had something wrong with his mouth. Chipped front teeth is what they said. Nolan does not. But to prove his innocence, that will answer a lot of your questions and your viewers' questions as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We are right out of time now. I can guarantee you we're going to have a part 2 on this. And as soon as we've finished, I do know that TJ is going to be on the phone to Tonja, trying to work out when we can fit her in for the next one. Firstly, I really do want to thank Patrick and Scott for stepping in when we lost the line and we lost connection with both Tonja and TJ. Thank you guys so much for just stepping in and stepping up once again as our regular roundtable team members, and your commitment. I applaud it once again and thank you very much for that. I also want to thank you, Tonja, for your contribution and your honesty on this show, and your endeavor to free your brother and exonerate him and clear his name. What an honourable thing to be doing. You know, most people would probably think maybe, well, you know, he's passed away now, you can give up the ghost. But no, here you are, still on the front line fighting. And not just for him, but others that are also wrongfully convicted, which is a fantastic work. And we are looking forward to linking up with you again on part 2. TJ, we're almost out of time, but I want to leave the last word with you because they keep trying to cut us out when we try to do important work, right?
Yeah, they do. What a fantastic show. Absolutely will be a part 2. We spoke about that, didn't we, Tonja?
Yes, we did.
And yeah, so are you game for that?
Oh, yes.
They might
anytime.
try to interrupt us, you know. They have a way of doing that. I want to thank Patrick. I want to thank Scott Rushing. Thank you so much for stepping up and taking over on a not surprising events that happened on Issues Today, World Jam Global Radio.
Okay, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, with that, there is no show next week. I'm away next week, and I'm doing some good work next week, by the way. I'm going to help organize and orchestrate a homeless project, which is many, many miles away from me, but I'm going to go and support a group of people who are good friends of mine, who've got a very similar soup kitchen to what I've got. And I have a mentoring program where I go into the prisons here in the UK, and I'm going into Buckley Hall Prison up in Rochdale, where I'm going to be supporting.
That's also fantastic.
Yeah. So there's a lot of work
we'll
being done here.
We'll stay updated on that,
so, yeah,
too.
So I'm away that next weekend.
Boss.
Yeah. But I will be back the week after, the 31st, where we're going to have... you'll just look out for the adverts, but we're going to be doing the story of Alton Sterling and that despicable murder by police in Baton Rouge, right here on the 31st of August. We've run out of time here. I want to thank you. I want to thank all of our guests that have taken part. I want to thank you, the audience, that have contributed on social media with your comments and etc. But most importantly, our greatest thanks is to Tonja Brown for bringing this story to light right here, live on World Jam Global Radio and Issues Today. And we look forward to linking up with you again, connecting with you again. And we pray for you, for your work, for your endeavor, and for your family. And we'll hold you close to our hearts. So until we meet again here on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, my name is Kervin Julian, and I'm out of here. See you later, guys.
Thank you. Goodbye.